Thank you all for giving we agency folks the opportunity to speak directly to you. Speaking on behalf of NSF, I'm Rick Murray. I'm the Division Director of Ocean Sciences. And lest there be any curiosity as to NSF's interest in the variety of subject matters being discussed here, by my count, I had to pull out my org chart to make sure I had it right, but there's 9 members of the Ocean Sciences Division here, including myself. Every program other than marine geology and geophysics is represented, and we're here for the vast majority of this meeting, and certainly able to answer any questions at the program level, the section head level, or what have you. There are several things I'd like to talk about today briefly. I'd like to go over some personnel changes, some large-scale budget potential issues. As you may or may not have heard, there's this election going on. And then also some more details about the ocean sciences budget, and then wrap up with some points about further points following up on exports from yesterday's really interesting discussion. So first of all, in terms of personnel, and as a comment to particularly the junior people out there, but you really need to make sure you know who your program officers are. And so at the risk of being a little too rah-rah here, if I could have everybody from NSF stand up. Not just raise your hands, but stand up. So I want to offer a minor correction to what Debbie Bronk said yesterday in the context of exports. She said, if you have any questions or concerns, go see Don Rice, who's the gentleman right there in the white shirt, or Rick Murray. I would just, in a gentle way, correct Debbie and actually point out that it's actually the program officers at NSF are the ones with the real power, because they control the money and the programmatic directions and decisions. So please make sure you reach out to the other program officers, and Mete Uz, who I don't see standing up, as well as Jujing Davis, who I also don't see right here yet from physical oceanography. There are some other people as well. So those are the NSFers, myself included, and please absolutely make sure you go talk to them and express your hopes, dreams, desires, goals, and all those sorts of things. We also want to express regrets from Hetty Edmonds, who is the new lead chemistry, chemical oceanographer program director. She heads up the chemical program. We were fortunate to steal her, if you will, from Polar. Many of you know Hetty from her science days, as well as her other NSF days, and we're delighted that she is taking over for chemical oceanography. She has immense shoes to fill, as Don Rice has been moved up to the section head position, and Don oversees chemical oceanography as well as marine geology and geophysics. So Hetty was unable to attend this particular meeting. Bill Miller, Bill, I saw you stand up. There you are. Billy Miller in the back there is here from chemistry. Also, overall, you may have noticed that there have been a number of advertisements out seeking IPA rotators. We are able to expand the physical oceanography program by 1 IPA. So physical oceanography from here forward will have 2 permanent people, who's currently Eric Itzware and Mete Uz, and then 2 rotators. Jujing Davis is one of the rotators, and we're right now searching for an additional rotator. So physical oceanography, which for years has had 3, will now have 4. And also MG&G is in the process of searching for a paleoceanography IPA, in addition to a permanent marine geophysicist. So MG&G will have 5. Candace Major is the lead MG&G program officer, and since she's been so intimately involved with paleoceanographic program management, including P2C2 and several other things, because she's taking over lead, we need to have somebody in to backfill and help out on the paleoceanographic side as well. So we were able to seek and gain approval to expand MG&G up to 5. Okay, so there are some changes in personnel at OCE. Make sure you know who people are, and We feel that we need to make these expansions in our programs, not because there's any problems with any programs, in fact, far from it. These people are, the program officers are excellent people working their tails off, and they're just able to keep up with the proposals that are coming in. But by hiring additional staff members, we feel this will enable us to do, increase our ability to be proactive and responsive to the community, attend various meetings, so on and so forth. So we're quite excited about that. Okay, big picture budget. Yeah, there's an election going on. Everything's up in the air. And it's going to be a very interesting 6 or 8 months, or however long it takes, for us to come out the other side and see what the new landscape is. The largest implication is, of course, for the federal budget. Everything so far is pointing towards a continuing resolution. We have been provided guidance. This is usually the time of year where we are working on next year's budget, and we've been provided guidance that we are not going to be preparing a detailed budget for the coming fiscal year, given the fluidity of both the congressional and executive branch situations. So we too are essentially planning for a continuing resolution, which for those of you that are not up on the proper lingo, that basically means last year, do it again. Just continue on with the same allocation level and the same allocation distribution as in the previous year. Now that's obviously problematic because there's no inflationary increase or anything of that scale. It's particularly problematic for ocean sciences because in particular we have pending requests for the Regional Class Research Vessel, RCRV project. We sought approval from the director and received approval from the National Science Board to include 2 RCRV vessels in the presidential budget request. And we did get those 2 vessels in the presidential request. Congress, the Senate, for various reasons, did their budget assessment first, and they said, thank you very much, NSF. We really believe you that you need those 2 ships, and in fact, we believe you so much, we think you should have 3 ships, which was interesting. That was consistent with what UNOLS had recommended and many members of the community. NSF had done our own internal study and concluded that we could meet the anticipated needs of the science community with the 2, which is why we requested the 2. Congress said, or excuse me, the Senate said 3. Several weeks later, the House said, well, that's really interesting, President Obama, and that's also really interesting, our dear colleagues in the Senate. We're going to give you 0. And so what that means is now the House and the Senate need to get in conference and hash out their differences. And so one could anticipate 0, 1, 2, or 3 ships. I wouldn't put money on 4, but you never know. So all kidding aside, how do we handle this? Because there are contracts that need to be written, all sorts of things that need to be planned. One doesn't just say, okay, we're going to go build a ship today. And so we are in the process of working through with Director Cordova of the NSF, as well as communicating to Congress how we would handle any of those options, namely 0, 1, 2, or 3, the potential impact on our operation and maintenance budget, and so on and so forth. But we are now at this point in a holding pattern, but I do want to reassure the community that we are in discussion. The Hill has reached out to us. We are providing them with data as to why we believe 2 ships is the right number, the capabilities of the ships, the potential distributions of the ships, and so on and so forth. Another aspect of this is, well, when is the House and the Senate going to get together? You can talk to many, many, many people that know far more about this sort of thing than do I, and there are estimates ranging anywhere from before the election to right after the election to right after the inauguration, depending on who gets in and what the disposition of the Senate is. And everybody down there in DC, as you can imagine, is tea leaf reading, and nobody really knows. So we're just going to keep on doing our thing and prepare for every potential outcome as best we can. Okay, OCE budget. As you're aware, 18 months or so ago, the NAS Sea Change report came out, recommended a reallocation of money from the infrastructure side of our budget to the science side of our budget. And they specifically recommended decreases of 20%, 10%, and 5% in the O&M, respectively, of OOI, the IODP, and the academic research fleet. We've been very, very successful in starting such reallocation, and I'm pleased that over last year and this year, there's already about $10 million more available to the science and technology programs than there was the previous years. And we made that change. We made about 5 or 6 of that million last year, and we were able to preserve that $5 or $6 million increase from last year into this year's budget and add on to that by another 4 million or so, which is where we're coming up with that 10 or 11 million. Some of that money is going into the ocean technology program, which used to be on the order of 6 or 7 million or so a couple of years ago, and now we're able to increase it up to about 10 million. So that's a 33% increase, which is a big percentage because we're dealing with small numbers, but it has made an immediate impact, certainly in technology, because the NAS report recommended the reallocation go to science and technology, and we are speaking to that directly. As I said then, from 10 minus 3, you get about 7 million, 7 or 8 million already into the core programs. So we're very pleased we're able to do this. The program officers in ocean sciences have been wonderful to work with as we work through this, because in many cases it's the same program officers who are intimately involved with the infrastructure side of things. And on the one hand, while we never want to take money away from things, it's often the same program officers and the same programs. We're all one big OCE. We're seeing the benefit to the science programs as well. Now, $10 million at this point is not going to spin up huge, new, massive programs for decades long. But just remember, if you take $300,000, $400,000 or so individual PI grants, 10 million goes a long way. And there are a lot more happy people out there these days than there were 2 years ago. I also want to emphasize that we are not done yet. And as I just said, though, goodness knows what the heck is going to happen with next year's budget. But we're hoping to continue this trend as some of these other changes come online with our decreasing of our O&M on the infrastructure side of things. My most optimistic projection, as many of you know, I tend to be an optimistic guy, so why not? My most optimistic projection is about 16 to 18 million by the time FY18, FY19 comes around, will have eventually been transferred from the infrastructure into the science technology programs. All right, so we're about 2/3 of the way there so far. The OOI money decrease is largely being accomplished through the recompetition process. Their money decreasing from about 55 to 44 million, spread out over a couple of years as we ramp down. The IODP 10% is coming from a realignment that they had with their management teams a couple of years ago that's now starting to pay real financial dividends, actually in ways that we couldn't even anticipate, as well as they're increasing the amount of money being contributed by their international partners. And the decrease in the academic research fleet is coming because we have we're decreasing the number of ships overall. There are savings in fuel, but there are also savings in some other aspects of, in essence, how we manage various things in-house. But I also want to emphasize that in infrastructure, although we are dominating the conversation with these decreases, we are doing a heck of a lot of improvements. We've had a coring workshop as we've decided to no longer support the long core facility that used to be operated on the NOR. We're no longer supporting that, so we needed to figure out how we're going to be able to achieve deep penetration with piston coring. So we had a workshop on that. We've mapped out a whole plan as to how to rebuild the coring capabilities throughout the academic fleet. And so that's led to some tangible investments. We've also looking at seismic. We've had workshops on seismic, had community polls, and engaged the community in various ways as to how we're going to be moving forward throughout with a seismic plan, not just looking at one particular platform or one particular capability, but how we plan to support seismic research in the coming decades, because it's very important to what we do. And there are a bunch of small things that aren't really sexy and don't really ride high up on the newsletter type thing, but they're potentially vitally important. For example, we just did some tests looking at using synthetic rope on academic research fleet vessels. So this is neutrally buoyant, very high strength, non-9/16 wire rope on the fleet. And some of those tests were very, very successful. We tested them on coring on one of the Hui, I think it was the Endeavor actually, recently. And so we're cautiously, patiently moving forward with additional testing on that. That would have huge impact on the fleet if we're able to phase into synthetic rope, because it would mean we would be well within the safety standards of Appendix B, and it would just overall improve a lot of operations that we do on our ships. So even though on the infrastructure side, everyone's sort of focused on the downward of the savings and then the increases on the science side, but even on infrastructure, we're working really hard and making some real improvements that seagoing oceanographers and shore-based oceanographers are going to mutually benefit with in the future. We are also engaged with our colleagues at ONR and NASA and NOAA and BOEM in perhaps spinning up some technology programs through the NOP, NOPP, National Ocean Partnership Program. There's clearly, you look at all the stuff that was talked about yesterday and today and in the future, there's huge interest in new sensor technology, in new batteries, in miniaturization, all sorts of things like that. And whether you're doing work that's classified or unclassified or polar or tropical or shallow or deep, there's some common themes that all agencies would be very interested in addressing, and so we are actively exploring ways to do this, yet remain the ability to be nimble and follow technological lead being provided to us from the institutions. Okay, and lastly, I'd like just to wrap up with some comments about exports. I thought Mike Siraki gave a very nice summary yesterday, speaking on behalf of NSF. And I mentioned what Debbie said about reaching out to NSF. We certainly appreciate your feedback. Also, Paula and I speak quite frequently about matters between NSF and NASA. We all engage throughout ocean sciences and the community coming and back and forth in terms of watching what's going on. Mike yesterday said that there's no new money going to be associated with exports. And I just want to make sure everybody understands what we mean when we say no new money. Don't forget the word new there. That doesn't mean no money per se. It means no new money. Because as I just said, at the large scale, we don't have any idea what's going on with the federal budget. Okay? And there is not going to be a magical $15 million that's going to just appear out of nowhere that's going to come in, manna from heaven, and we're all going to lie on our backs kicking up $1,000 bills in the air. That's not going to happen. But what is going to happen potentially is as we have our discussions with our colleagues at NASA, and as we have our discussions with the community, and as we have our internal discussions and we work to liaise and interfinger our plans with NASA's plans, there are discussions within NSF about if there's community support, and since export science is core science, as asking many key scientific questions that are part of our core science agenda, the question is not only if we engage, but how we engage. And we need to be very careful that as we move forward, and if we move forward in this, that we do so not completely independently, but that we do so taking advantage of all the work that NASA's doing and the community is doing as we potentially move forward on this large project. Mike mentioned, for example, he said the money would be coming out of core programs. Another way of looking at this is the money would be part of core programs. Okay? So it's not to be really conceived as money being like removed from core programs and going off into a little box that could never be touched by anybody else. But because many of the export science questions are squarely potentially in the NSF wheelhouse, as it were, we are interested in participating as part of our core science programs in collaboration with our program officers and figuring out how to do it. So yes, there's no new money per se. But again, there's 9 NSF people here. There's obviously a lot of NSF people here for regular OCB meetings, but a lot of people are here because of the exports aspect of yesterday and throughout as a theme here. We are very interested. We're very interested in following along, and I can absolutely tell you that we are going to be continuing our discussions with NASA and the community as this exports project, hopefully, because NASA's got their thing that they're got to work through as well as we have our things we have to work through. But the NASA and NSF are moving ahead in close communication with each other as we figure out if and how to do this. Okay? So that's the direction that we're potentially headed. So I talked a lot more than just a third of the time here, probably, but I did want to give sort of a range of, or an overview of the range of things that we're dealing with these days in ocean sciences. There's only 43 members in the ocean sciences division, and that includes all administrative and financial staff. The workload is immense, and the program officers are really doing a great job keeping everything going all at once. I just wanted to give an overview about the scale of things that we work with and deal with on a daily basis. Thank you. Any questions? Questions, comments? Yes.
How do you want people to state or illustrate their support with respect to exports? Just by talking to you, sending an email we send?
So I'd follow on with what Debbie said. Certainly, just reach out to us. I mean, reach out to us, and not just in a veritable outburst today, right? But continually, and not in a nagging way, but get together with your groups and say, this is really important to us. If it is, this is important to us, and here's why. And the justification, certainly leveraging with what our federal agency partner friends are doing is important, but intellectually it has to stand alone, right? So it's sort of like, this is the science that we're interested in doing. Here's why. Here's why we have to do it. So, basically make the case. And then, oh yeah, and by the way, we can really do it because of the leveraging with, with NASA sort of thing. Talk to your program officers, just like we tell, all you grad students and postdocs out there, these program officers, they're real people too. They're nice people. Don't be intimidated. Reach out. Talk to them. Have you heard us give that advice all the time about individual proposals? And it's the same thing when you're talking about programs and shaped science like this. Talk to your program officers. Debbie.
So then you do want people to contact you as leadership to show support for exports?
Yes.
In addition to pitching
Yes.
individual proposals?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that yesterday you were totally fine, obviously, because you know what's going on, about reaching out to Dawn and myself, but really all the program officers, because programs are, where it's at. Thanks. Mike.
OCB helped organize a conference workshop a couple of years ago on Arctic North Atlantic processes, and there was a report. Can you give kind of an update? Are you getting proposals on that topic?
Dawn, the question was about Arctic, North Atlantic, and Dawn, I'm going to turn to Dawn to answer that if I could, because Dawn is kind of our Galway go-to North Atlantic guy on that.
The situation is simply this, it's what it has always been. The NSF programs are, oh, sorry, thank you. Is everybody awake now? By now, we hope that if you've been thinking about projects that could be done, collaboration with Canadians or with Europeans, that you've been in discussion and planning. All of the OCE programs and Arctic Natural Sciences as well are ready to receive proposals. However, as we indicated in the Dear Colleague letter, it is very important, that you first contact the program or programs that you're interested in working with at NSF. Ideally do that by email and contact all of the programs that might be interested at the same time, in the same email, to introduce your idea. That will cue the NSF program officers to talk with each other and sort out any details that need to ahead of time. And then from that point, you'll get guidance on how to proceed. In some cases, they may say, well, it sounds like it's ready to go, so go ahead. In other situations, they may say, well, you know, there may be some issues with ship time. Maybe you should delay submitting the proposal. The key thing here is that we're ready to get proposals, but you need to first make direct contact with the NSF programs.
Thank you, Don. Other questions? Jim?
Oh, I've heard that there's a move to go away from target dates.
Jim's question is, I've heard there's a move to go away from target dates. Interesting question. So various programs in NSF, throughout all of NSF, most germane to us, I would guess, would be the EAR division, Earth Sciences division. A couple of their programs have done some testing with getting rid of deadlines on their proposals. Now, it turns out AGS, Atmospheric and Geospatial Sciences, they don't have deadlines ever. That's the way they sort of do business. And there's a variety of the way different programs operate within NSF. EAR, when they did this experiment with 2 or 3 different programs, the number of proposals submitted declined by half. Now, if that was a 5% number or something like that, you could say, well, there's a little, stochastic aspects to this. Decreasing by half, that kind of got people's heads up, because then if you think about it, decreasing by half, not only does that decrease NSF's workload, but it decreases the workload, the burden on the community for reviewing, and it crescendos. So I will say this, is that GEO, so all of us, all 4 divisions, we're looking at this carefully. Within OCE, there are no definitive plans whatsoever in the near future as to do anything like that. But I will also say we're looking at it really carefully because, as I said, you got to look at that and ponder that one and figure out what's going on. But there will not be I can guarantee you this, there will not be a across the whole division, hey guys, next month we're getting rid of deadlines. Nothing like that. This is the sort of thing you've got to look really, really carefully at. There's implications for ship time requests. There's implications for how we interfinger with other agencies. There's implications for how we interfinger with other directorates within NSF and so on. But we are looking at it because, we'd be crazy not to. And perhaps there's other ways that we could, improve how we do things. Any last question at all, or comments from any other person from NSF who wants to clarify what I said? Ha! I knew it. Yeah, thanks, Julie. That's Julie Kellner, who from Biological Oceanography, rotator, rotating here from WHOI, so many of you probably know her, but for those of you that don't, that's Julie Kellner over there. So she asked about we just published a change, if you will, to our ship time policy. It used to be that we asked that you submit proposals that require ship time for one of the deadlines or the other deadline. But what we've done now is we've gotten rid of that, but we've just made it clear that if you're writing a proposal that requires a large vessel, global or ocean class, I believe it is, but certainly global class, that you understand that you need to submit that sufficiently early and that it might take longer to actually schedule that science to happen and to go to sea. I believe we said about 18 months ahead of time, as opposed to the somewhat unwritten expectation that it would happen, that fiscal year or soon thereafter type thing. Basically, it's because we need to we want to be responsive to the community and not bin you and force you into one deadline or the other, because we know that science has its own pace and relationships with other directorates and agencies and other deadlines and so on. But on the other hand, the reality of it is it takes us longer, and there's just it's harder to get all the pieces lined up for those large-scale ship projects. So it takes about 18 months for the big ones, and then the others, it's a shorter scheduling time. Thank you. I'll take one more question. I don't want to take too much time, but I see no one pulling me off either. So one more question from Jim, and then we're all around the whole week too, so please
So
ask.
the question is, exports is highly interdisciplinary.
Yeah.
So how are those proposals, are they submitted to two branches of OCE?
So the question is exports is highly disciplinary, so should proposals be submitted to, a couple different programs, or how we're going to do that? This is all under discussion, and at this point, there is no program in exports at NSF, so there's nothing to submit to. But the standard answer on that would be, should there be something that is interest, that contact your program officer if it's not self-evident by how or if we decide to move ahead. So right now, that's question's a little too early in the process. But we completely acknowledge the fact that it's interdisciplinary, and that's the whole point. All right. Thank you. Who's up? I'm just going to stand here with a microphone. I'm not sure who's coming up.